So before we move on to the development of the party system, it's important to clarify exactly what we mean. When we talk about parties, we're actually talking about three separate groups of people. These all seem pretty self-explanatory, but are important to know, so make sure you know the distinction between the three, both for life and for the upcoming quiz. The party in government is an alliance of current office holders cooperating to shape public policy. So basically this refers to anyone who holds elected office. The party organization is the group of people dedicated to electing the party's candidates. Typically we mean anyone employed by either of the major party committees, the DNC, the RNC, some of the campaign committees, the DSCC, the RCCC, etc., or a candidate themselves. Finally, we have the party in the electorate, which is composed of voters who identify with the party and regularly vote for its nominees. Your textbook argues that there's a weakening of power of political parties over a few decades, and what they call fractured alignments. Basically, the authors argue that divisive issues have split the parties and weakened partisan identities. This means that the party label doesn't necessarily provide the information voters want. If I want a candidate who is pro-life, pro-gun, and anti-gay marriage, I might vote Republican. However, if I start to see Republicans who are pro-choice or pro-gun control or pro-gay marriage, then I lose some of the certainty that Republicans represent my interests, and now I actually have to start learning about candidates. That seems like a lot of work, so potentially I will just stop voting. The other side is that I'm more likely to split on the issues than my parties, so I might be pro-gay marriage, and hear the National Republican Party talking too much and too negatively about gay marriage, so it makes me like the Republican Party less. I'm, other pro-Republican issues, so I'm not going to become a Democrat, but I will be less attached to my party. We're also seeing ticket splitting increase, where voters vote for a Democrat for president, let's say, and a Republican for Congress, or the other way around. The explanation for this is that the increase in the power of incumbency has become so strong. We like our member of Congress even when we don't like the party or Congress itself. It's how John McCain used to get over 80% of the votes statewide in Arizona, despite Arizona not being 80% Republican. People liked him because he was a prominent member of the Senate, and they were happy with his job, whether they agreed with him on the issues or not. In recent years, however, the parties have been revived. We're seeing a modest increase in partisanship in the electorate, ticket splitting is down, and voters are becoming more and more opinionated about the two parties. Whenever you read an article about the decline of parties and how we're going to see a third party emerge or whatever, someone like Bernie Sanders is going to start a third party, remember that parties are still indispensable to elected officials, candidates, and voters. Whether you like it or not, and put me clearly in the not camp, the two-party system is here to stay. Most people label themselves as Republicans or Democrats. It fluctuates over time, but roughly 70 to 75% of the electorate identifies with one of the two major parties. However, the number of people who claim to be independents has increased over time. But we also know that these people are typically lying. Independents are typically closeted partisans who don't want to admit to being part of one of the major two parties. I always tell the story about my mom when I get to this lecture, and how she's an independent and will argue passionately with anyone who tries to label her as a Democrat or Republican. She likes to have people think of her as a free-thinking, independent person who analyzes the issues every election and learns about the candidates, comes up with an answer to who the best candidate is. The only problem with that is she's voted Democrat every time since she was 18, with only one exception where she voted for John McCain in the Republican primary back in 2000. However, she still voted for Al Gore in the general election, so her Democratic streak is consistent there. True independents usually don't vote because they don't like either of the major candidates and are more apathetic than independents. They don't see a reason to turn out because they don't care, not because they're truly independent or neutral on the issues or centrist or whatever. Democrats typically have more people identifying with their parties. The number is usually 36% Democrat to 32-ish Republican, depending on the day and the survey and how people feel at the moment. But people who vote consistently tend to be more Republican. A big example of this is young people tend to identify as Democrats, but don't vote as much, while old people tend to identify as Republicans and do vote.